Year 2. We hope you're all right and enjoying being at home, and we hope that this silly virus is going to stop soon and we'll see you very soon at school. We're very excited too. So, what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a story to you, and it's called The Mousehole Cat. And this is what we're going to be doing for the next few weeks in our home learning. And even if we come back to school, this is what we'll do as well. So it's a really good thing to listen to it. The Mousehole Cat is about a little pussycat and a fisherman who live in a village called Mousehole. Now it's spelt Mousehole, but in Cornwall they call it Mousehole. And I'll read the story and it will explain why in a minute. I love going to Mousehole. I go to Mousehole every single year. It's a tiny weeny village in Cornwall and it's just lovely. So I'm going to read the story to you, okay, and I'm going to stop sort of halfway through or whenever I feel is necessary, and I'll ask you some questions and I'll get you to have a little think, and you can stop the video and you can have a little think about what the questions I'm asking you are and how you would answer it. Okay, so this is The Mousehole Cat by Antonia Barber. Right. It's a bit hard to show you. I'll show you the picture. At the far end of England, a land of rocks and moorlands stretches itself out into a blue-green sea. Between its high headlands lie a tiny sheltering harbours where the fishing boats hide when the winter storms are blowing. One of these harbours is so small and the entrance between its great stone breakwaters is so narrow that the fishermen called it the Mousehole. So can you see? That's a breakwater there. Well, that's Fisherman Tom, but behind there's breakwater. And there's a breakwater, and that stops all of the sort of thunderous waves that come crashing through, and it protects all the boats that live inside. So it's very narrow, so that's why they call it the Mousehole. The people who lived in the cottage around the harbour grew fond of the name, and they call their village Mousehole to this day. They say it in the Cornish way, Mousehole, but you may say it as you choose. Once there lived in the village a cat whose name was Mouser. She had an old cottage with a window overlooking the harbour, and an old rocking chair with patchwork cushions, and an old fisherman named Tom. So that's Tom there, and that's Mouser there. And this house actually exists in Cornwall. It's very cool. Got this one here. It's a bit tricky to read this. Mouser had many kittens in her time, but they had all grown up and left home. Her eldest son kept the inn on the quayside. That's a pub. It was noisy and smoky, and his man had once spilled beer on Mouser's head, and as he was drawing a pint. So she did not go there very often. Around it. One of her daughters kept the shop on the corner. It was busy and crowded, and her lady had once stepped on Mouser's tail as she was weighing out some vegetables. So she did not go there very often either. Sometimes Mouser felt that her children had not trained their people properly. Let's have a little think. Do we normally say that our pets train us, or do we say that we train our pets? Have a little think about that. There's a nice picture there. Her own pet, old Tom, was very well behaved. He never spilled the cream when he was filling her saucer. He always stoked the range to a beautiful golden glow. He rocked the rocking chair at just the right speed. He knew the exact spot behind her left ear where Mouser liked to be tickled. What was more, he never wasted his time drawing pints of beer or weighing out vegetables. When he was not looking after Mouser, he passed the day in the most beautiful, useful way possible. He took his little boat through the narrow opening between the great breakwaters, out into the blue-green sea, and caught fish for Mouser's dinner. What a lucky fish. Mouser was very partial to a plate of fresh fish. In fact, she never ate anything else, but she liked a little variety. Variety means a little bit of a change. So on Mondays, they made morgie broth, Mouser's favourite fish stew. On Tuesdays, they baked hake and topped it with golden mashed potatoes. On Wednesdays, they cooked a kedgeree with delicious smoked ling. On Thursdays, they grilled fairmaids, a mouth-watering meal. On Fridays, they fried launces with a knob of butter and a squeeze of lemon. On Saturdays, they soused scat with vinegar and onions. And on Sundays, they made stargazy pie with prime pilchard in pastry. All in all, Mouser's day passed very pleasantly. And that's Tom and Mouser cooking on their oven, which was called the Range. That looks very yummy, doesn't it? Very lucky pussycat. Then, one year, came a terrible winter. At the far end of England, the blue-green sea turned grey and black. The great storm cat is stirring, thought Mouser, as she watched at her window. Have a little think. Can you see that there's water here, but it's in the shape of a claw? What do you think this author's trying to do there? Have a little think. The great storm cat is stirring, thought Mouser, as she watched at her window. The wind whined like a wild thing about the high headlands. It came hunting the fishing boats in their hidden harbours. When the great storm cat is howling, thought Mouser, it is best to stay snug indoors by a friendly fire. So I think that this author is making the storm a bit like a cat here. Can you see there's got cat claws? And do you remember this is called the Mousehole? So it's almost pretending that the cat is trying to claw its way in and get to all of the boats in here. It's almost pretending that these are the mice and the storm is the cat. The sea drew itself up into giant waves and flung itself against the great breakwaters. All along the coast of Cornwall, the stone walls stood the shock. Then the sea sucked up its strength again and roared right over them, sinking the sailing boats in their home havens. But it could not get into the Mousehole. Mouser watched as the great storm cat clawed with his giant cat's paw through the gap in the harbour wall, but it was too small. He snarled and leaped up at the great breakwater under the lowering sky, but it was too high. The fishing boats sat safe as mice in their own mousehole, but they could not get out. So we did say, actually, didn't we, that we were saying that the boats were almost like mice, and it's saying here, the fishing boats sat safe as mice in their own mousehole, but they could not get out. So there's a bit of a problem there because they can't get out. What do you think the problem's going to be if they can't get out? Have a little think. Look, there's Mouser there watching that naughty storm cat. And because the fishermen could not fish, there was no more food. They ate up the few vegetables that were left in their storm-racked gardens. They ate up the salted pilchards that were too salty for her taste. And soon there was nothing left. The cats and their people grew very hungry. Mouser sat by her window, staring at the storm, and thought longingly of morgie broth and stargazy pie. Every day the fishermen gathered on the quayside, and sometimes they would try to take a boat out through the Mousehole, but always the great storm cat lay in wait for them, and they were lucky to escape with their lives. The storm cat is still going. Okay. Look, there's Tom and Mouser again. Wonder what they're thinking. Can you make a little prediction? What do you think that Tom and Mouser are talking about? What do you think Tom might go and do? Then at last, one evening, as old Tom sat with Mouser on his knee, she felt him take a deep sigh. Mouser, my handsome, he said, for he was a courteous and well-spoken man. Mouser, my handsome, it will soon be Christmas, and no man can stand by at Christmas and see the children starve. Someone must go fishing, come what may, and I think it must be me. Oh no. It cannot be the young men, for they have wives and children, and mothers to weep for them if they do not return. But my wife and parents are dead long since, and my children are grown up and gone. Mouser purred to tell him that she understood, for it was the same with her. Because her children left as well, didn't they? So that two of them have come together, but Mouser has accepted that Tom can go sailing. I shall go out tomorrow, Mouser, my handsome, said the old man, and I shall not come back without a catch. Mouser purred louder to tell him that she would go with him, for he was only a man, she thought, and men were like mice in the paws of the great storm cat. Oh, gosh. Besides, she knew that if she did not come back, she would not much care to live in her cottage without him. There would be no one to pour the cream or stoke up the range or rock the rocking chair. There would be no one in the world who knew just where she liked to be tickled behind her left ear. Tomorrow night, Mouser, my handsome, he said, we shall eat morgy broth, baked hake, lingen launces, fair maids, soused scad, and stargazy pie. Then Mouser purred as if she would burst to tell him that she loved him more than any of these things. The next morning they set out very early, before the others were waking. Before they went, Tom stoked up the old range and damped it down so that it would burn steadily until they returned. Then he hung a lamp in the window so that it would shine out across the harbour and light their way. As they reached the quayside, Mouser looked back through the wind and rain and thought how warm and welcoming the window looked. Oh, I wonder if she's beginning to regret this now. Regret means that she's thinking, oh no, this might not be a good idea after all. It's very rainy there. Soon their little boat was crossing the harbour towards the Mousehole Gap, and the voice of the great storm cat rose all around them like a giant caterwauling. Can you see that? They're just at the mouse hole. I wonder what's going to happen. As she listened to his wailing, Mouser felt a sudden strange sadness for the storm cat. How lonely he must be, she thought, endlessly hunting the men-mice in the deeps of darkness, and never returning to the rosy glow of a red-hot range. And her kind heart was moved to comfort him. Many a tomcat had Mouser tamed in her time with the sweetness of her singing. Now she lifted her head and sang like a siren, joining her call with the cry of the great storm cat. So Mouser is actually singing to the storm cat. I wonder, what do you think? Do you think that will help? I wonder. And so it was that he was taken off guard as the little boat made its bid for freedom. Also, he managed to get, by his singing, he managed to get the storm cat to calm down for a minute so they could get the fisherman boat out. Soothed by the sweetness of Mouser's serenade, the great storm cat paused in his prowling and pulled back his giant cat's paw for a mere moment. Swiftly the little boat passed through the mousehole and out into the open sea. Then the great storm cat played with them as a cat plays with a mouse. He would let them loose for a little as they fought their way towards the fishing grounds. Then down would come his giant cat's paw in a flurry of foam and water. But he did not yet strike to sink them, for that would have spoiled his sport. When they reached the fishing grounds, the sea was so rough that it was hard to put out the nets. I fancy you must sing again, Mouser, my handsome, said Tom, for your voice seems to soothe the sea like the sirens of old. So Mouser sang again, longer and louder than she had ever sung before. Indeed, old Tom was forced to block up his ears so that her siren song should not distract him from the business of fishing. And again the great storm cat paused in his play and sang with her until the nets were safely shot. Can you sing like a cat? Have a little go. Now look at this beautiful picture. Can you see this lovely picture here? I'll zoom in a minute. So this is the storm, okay? This is the big storm, and it is like a cat. Can you see the paw? And it's playing with the boat like it's a mouse. I'm going to show you right up close here now. Can you see that? Sort of playing with it like a cat would play with a mouse or a little toy. It's a very pretty picture, isn't it? Look at that storm. I would not like to be in that. Would you? I definitely wouldn't. All day they fished in a seething sea. The waves were so high and the clouds so low that they soon lost sight of the shore. And all the time the great storm cat played with the little boat, striking it and then losing it, but never quite sinking it. And whenever his claws grew too sharp, Mouser would sing to him to soften the edge of his anger. As the evening came down, they hauled in the nets into the belly of the boat, tumbled ling and launces, scad, hake and fair maids, enough fish for a whole cauldron of morgy broth, enough pilchards for 100 stargazy pies. Look at all of those fish there. How do you think Mouser's feeling there? I think he's feeling pretty happy and pretty hungry. Mouser, my handsome, we are all saved, said old Tom. If we can but bring this haul home to the harbour. But Mouser knew that the great storm cat would strike when he saw them run for the shelter of the Mousehole. She knew that the game serves only to sharpen the appetite for the feast to follow. It is his meal or mine, thought Mouser, as she looked at the floundering fish in the belly of the boat. Blue, green and silver, they glistened in the greyness. It made her mouth water to look at them. I'm feeling a bit hungry now as well. Look at that lovely picture there. Very nice, isn't it? The cat seems calmer now, doesn't he? How do you think I know that he looks calmer? What do you think I'm looking at to help me with that? As she thought of the morgy broth, murmuring on top of the range, the stargazy pie growing golden in the oven, Mouser began to purr, and her purring rose like a hymn to home above the noise of the great storm cat's howling.